Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king. And the guest I had with me this week on Business Focus had a problem in his previous role. He was struggling with cash flow. But not only did he solve that problem, he solved it so well that he spun off a new business that was focused entirely on solving that same problem for other businesses. He eventually sold that business to ConnectWise, and he is now the GM and VP of payments at ConnectWise. So Paul MacNeil is his name, and he has a really interesting story to tell, and I think one that is universally applicable across every business. Before I let you go into today's episode, please also go to firstfocus.com.au/insights if you'd like to keep up to date with more content as we release episodes every week. Enjoy. Paul MacNeil, I've got VP and GM of payments at ConnectWise is the title.
That's it.
Right. I don't understand the VP and GM part, but you can maybe tell us. What do you do at ConnectWise? Tell us your story.
Yeah, so my background is I ran an MSP, started a software company, sold it to ConnectWise. So I went from CEO to VP and GM. So in principle, that is organizationally responsible for the business unit.
Okay.
So fundamental to the product, and then obviously delivery of all aspects of the P&L. So kind of responsible for all capabilities that we produce, but as well as the financial performance of the business unit.
Okay. What we're interested in covering off with you today is, I guess you're focused on payments, right? Like, essentially, I assume that what are the metrics in your role? Like when it comes to helping MSPs make client payments easy, what are you focusing on or helping them improve?
How to achieve payment success, essentially. So I think the primary focus for me and thinking about it from an MSP, a business standpoint, is how quickly you can get paid. So from a practical point of view, that means people engaged with you through the creation of a profile to save a payment method and then to pay you on a periodic basis. So we help to create that systematic approach by giving you the tools to be able to get your customers onto our platform quickly and efficiently, save a bank account or credit card securely, and then transact on a repeating basis easily. Yeah. So for us, the success really comes down to adoption of the product, how many payers are starting to use the product, but also the proportion between number of invoices generated and the automatic payments that are created. So for us, it's about automation. And as it is in the industry generally, and all industries really, is about how you can take human capital, the cost of running a business, and turning that into automation that creates essentially a better profit margin. The best way that I look at it is, if you're a business and you sell a product or service, you issue an invoice to your client, you don't make a cent from the point that you issue that invoice to the moment that money's in your bank account. So everything you do costs you money. The time, the resource, the people, the processes, the systems. You have to reduce that because your profitability depends on the speed in which you collect. Not so much profitability, but the actual cash flow of your business is dependent on the speed in which you collect that payment. And essentially, profit is going to be what creates better outcomes for business owners. And of course, for the longevity of any business is the survivability through good cash flow.
When you're talking about those actions post-invoice issue, right, I assume making sure you've got the follow-up cadence, you've probably got a point at 30 days that's different from 60 days, and all this stuff happens. Have you, as a business, been able to put any numbers around that to illustrate the overhead or the cost of not essentially managing payment effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think if time is money, both in cost and also opportunity, the longer it takes to get paid, the less opportunity you have from that dollar earned. You may have it in your financial statements, but if it's not in your bank, you can't deploy it unless you're using debt leverage to essentially create that opportunity. So cash flow is the foundation of every business. It underpins everything. It's the oxygen of how businesses run. So what we look at is the proportion of payments that are automated creates better outcomes for businesses. I ran an MSP for about 15 years, so went through many different stages as a single operator, break fix MSP, moving into larger scale organization. And what we found is there was a crunch point. It was probably about the $1 million mark in terms of turnover and revenue, where cash flow became really difficult because I was the sole operator. I was doing everything, wore all the hats, and I was also responsible for collection of payment. And this is going back to sort of maybe mid 2000, 2010, 2011. when we're looking at our business and saying, how are we going to grow? How are we going to create better value for me as a business owner, and also the prosperity of my employees and the benefits and the outcomes that come with that? And the reality of it was we were starved from cash flow. We couldn't do anything, make decisions, or really drive the business growth because we were living hand to mouth or check to check, as they call it here in the US. The reality of it was our DSO, or day sales outstanding, was 48. So we had a very, probably in corporate landscapes, that's probably not too bad, but from a business standpoint, that was killing me because I was not able to do the things that I wanted to do in my business because I was worried about payroll. I was worried about the rental payment, paying the bills, the taxes and other things. Once I changed the mindset there of building a product essentially to help with that, to automate that was where we saw dramatic change in our business focus, but also our cash flow supported by automation. So my business in principle was starved by the fact that we didn't have good cash flow. But then at the outcome of that, turning it around and creating a product and implementing that in my business and focusing on it as a business owner, it gave me the ability to take it from 48 days down to 4. So when I sold my business in 2016, it actually came up in due diligence as something like, where's your accounts receivable? Like, where is everything that surrounds a normal business function? I'm like, well, everything's paid on the first of the month, due in 0 days, deposited in my bank account on the 4th day.
What did that do for you to drive EV?
Well, it got greater value.
Yeah,
so the benefit to me was good cash flow, free available cash flow throughout the course of my growth. Meant that we could make decisions around technology, tools, capabilities, people, resources, because we weren't looking at it saying we can't afford it because we didn't have the cash flow to fund it. Obviously there's other options to fund things through business. Debt.
But you'd rather not. There's a cost to that.
I grew my business through no debt.
I think I'd just say it's probably bigger business privilege. When you're at a scale that cash flow issue is less pronounced at times. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of exceptions, but it's been a while since I've had to think about cash flow in a smaller business, and that is not how I was thinking about it when I asked the question. I was thinking it's the actual inputs to chase up debts rather than the opportunity cost of not having that money.
And the inputs that the cost of chasing debt. So you've got all those interaction points. You're the owner of the business. You need to pick up the call and pick up the phone and call a key account that hasn't paid their bill in 30 days and it's $10,000 a month and they're 2 months now and you're worried about what's happening. So you've got to make those phone calls. But for us, our business was so focused on the automation side of it that it allowed us to forget about the risk associated with account risk in terms of financial risk as it related to whether they were going to pay, because we knew immediately if that payment was going to fail. So if their bank account returned a rejection, insufficient funds, the phone call was right then. Hey, look, we just had a return on your direct debit. Just checking in. Oh yeah, sorry that we had to move some funds around. You can run it again. Okay, great. Whereas what we saw later in the business was that was the marker for us to start having conversations with partners about what's happening. Hey, look, we're having a bit of a tough time at the moment. Do you reckon you could sort of, shift it around for us, like split it into? So then you start to think about how do I risk manage? I've got a $5,000 a month SPLA license agreement attached to that organization. How do I manage that risk? Now it's CSP, but back then it was SPLA.
Very cool.
And then we would be able to then manage that expectation. Like, do we need to start paring back some of the services we provide? How do we practically manage that? Because if they go to the wall with 3 months owing, that could have been the difference between the profit on that account over the entire term. If we lost the opportunity to collect that in full. $20,000 a month over 3 months. What profit were you hoping to make? Well, it's probably just gone.
So I have pretty strong feelings about the whole mentality of businesses paying each other, because there's such a almost dynamic where the bigger you are, the more you can kind of bully the smaller bit, but it's just pervasive across. And for us, we want to run a business where we pay every bill on time. We expect to pay every bill on time, right? That's how the world should operate. And it's unfair that businesses don't. The challenge is, as I said, the larger businesses often want to
use that as a tactic.
pushback.
Yeah.
No, our process. This is how we pay. What's the strategy to actually getting all your customers on direct debit?
I think that's a really great question, because that's normally the leading objection that partners that start using our product. Oh, my clients don't want direct debit. They wouldn't use it. We don't offer credit card because of the fees. It's like there's all these barriers to the reasons why not to do it. And my approach is always start doing it. That's the best time to do something is now. And if you haven't already done it, now's still the best time to start. And the reality of that outcome is, if you have a conversation, you're in a business arrangement with that customer, that client, that business. When I was rolling out our new contracts, and the contract terms were 0 days, direct debit on receipt, we would bill you on the first of the month, we would take the funds on the first of the month. Predictable, direct, and more importantly, the pattern is established. So to get them onto that, it did take some time. It took some evaluation as to what was the barriers. And what I found in most cases was that they wanted to use you as a method for their cash flow.
For funding,
for funding. So the concept is you become your client's bank. Yeah. And that's never good for any business, to be a funding provider to the services that you've already provided. So you can't claw back the help desk tickets that you've already remediated. You can't claw back the Microsoft licenses that you've already paid because you're a good corporate citizen.
Yeah.
You can only focus on having a conversation with the client at the time when you're selling the service. This is how we do business. These are the mechanisms in which we approach that. It's direct debit, first of the month. This is how we pay. And there's really no exceptions. And we had clients that were paying $40,000, $50,000 a month towards, their whole of business solution with us. Internet connections, software licensing, hardware as a service, software as a service, like everything was bundled up into that. And, you can imagine the cash outflow with that type of managed services agreement. So the conversation was simple. I pay my bills, you pay your bills. If I don't pay my bills, your services are dead in the water. So we have to make sure that we're in sync. And if today we're going to sign a 3-year contract to say this is what we're going to provide, and you have a concern about your cash flow for that amount of money on a periodic basis, let's have a conversation now, not in 3, 6, or 9 months.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it still astounds me now that, we go through a contract negotiation with a potential customer, and the thing they're arguing about is the late fees if they're not going to pay. It's like, why are we worried about not paying? Like, we haven't even started an arrangement. You're telling me you're not going to pay?
Then that's already a red flag.
That says one of two things. You've either got terrible processes, or they're not particularly solvent.
Yeah, or they're not good at managing their own customers, right? And that seems to be the flow through the industry, right?
And I'll use another example of that whole journey too. For us was, we work with some larger organizations, probably not so much as large as the companies you'd be working for now, but schools and other larger organizations were very clear about their procurement process. So they would have to sign. There'd be a lot of practical things that would have to be put in place. So especially with the schools that we were working with, we would have the procurement manager sign off. We'd have the business manager sign off, the principal sign off. But then at the same time, it's like, this is the procurement process for this service. And this is how we would direct debit. So how we can set that up and the mechanics of it can be done. Yeah. Often they'll say, we don't do direct debit.
Yeah.
Well, the reason for that is because it doesn't sit inside the procurement process. But if they can establish the procurement process, and this is how we perform in that situation. Now, if I remember correctly, they were on 15 days. So, they were an organization that paid 0. So we issued the invoice, but it was debited on the 15. That allowed them to run their procurement process before the debit occurred. And we also gave them the ability to come back and query any changes.
Yeah.
What happened was, it was only the contract to start, but then it became, just do everything because it's easier for us to manage in this way as a consistent approach. And that comes back to the point that I was going to say is starting with something, the agreement, the Microsoft licensing, incentivizing them to go into an agreement direct debit usually results in, look, can you just take everything? Whenever you issue an invoice, give me 7 days to query a service invoice if you're billing extras over and above. And that gives them the ability to have some controls, but doesn't release or relinquish essentially the ultimate capability of that direct debit.
I like all of that, and it actually kind of answers the question I was going to come back with, which is being devil's advocate. If you're a smaller business and you're about to land that whale, right, who's going, no, I'm going to be 60 days and I don't want any late penalties or anything like that. It's so hard to say no because you really need that account, right? Like it's so I was going to say, how do you get past that? And the answer is, well, get something on direct debit.
Yes.
Start there and go more.
Here is where we need to start.
Yeah.
So these are the must-haves. So, essentially, if you're committing to a managed services agreement, which has office licensing and all the things that businesses truly need, they can't put that at risk.
No.
So they can't use that as leverage to say, well, I don't want to choose whether or not to pay you because, well, you can say, well, I'm going to choose whether or not you continue to benefit from the service.
And there's no variability, right? So it's like it's set. It should be pretty easy to account for.
And I mean, another conversation that I think is really good to have is the actually demonstrating to a customer or to people internally what the cost difference is between 0 days and 60 days. The cost of that of funding that money ourselves in the interim, the cost of the risk, the cost of, and as soon as we put, okay, well, this is the price normally, sure, 60 days is an option, but that's actually an extra 5% it will actually cost to do that. And then it's your choice, right? But then people generally default to the default, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think sort of this then starts to come to the pointy end of essentially cash flow and the challenges that ensure following cash flow challenges. That is, once you start to have cash flow issues, you then usually start to create more concern around the risk associated with the cash coming in. So what I mean by that is I'm looking at things like debtor funding. I'm looking at how do I get money in because I'm not able to pay my financing. And, coming from an accounting background and my brother's an insolvency accountant, the number one thing that destroys businesses is cash flow.
Yeah.
And the number one thing that usually results in them being in that insolvency event or liquidation is debtor funding. And they go through that cycle thinking, I'm going to earn my way out of this because I'm going to get more cash flow, but they didn't fix the problem.
Yeah.
And then they come back to this whole issue of, and usually it ends up in they issue more invoices and then they're collecting more payments than what they should, and that gets clawed back and then it's over. So if I was ever to say to anyone in business that's in a position of cash shortfall or managing cash flow as a challenge, go to the problem, don't go to the solution. Don't go to buy now, pay later, or don't offer your customers installment plans. Ultimately, if they've got cash flow issues, you have to deal with the problem. And that is they can't afford the service you're providing. Don't give them the ability to extend that out 30, 60, 90, 120 days on a payment plan if there's no prospect of them ever actually coming out the other side of that in a way in which, you're going to actually have a recovery of that amount of money owing to you.
How cash recovery is often quite hidden from just about everyone in the business, right? Like, as you said, even companies like us that share financials internally, it's still, it's one thing to share financials, but as you said, it doesn't mean you're actually getting paid for that money, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so what's your, I guess, best practice or thoughts around, should account managers, where should account managers be on the actual, cash position of their clients? What about other teams that service those guys? How much are you discussing cash in the business as opposed to just profit or revenue?
Yeah, I think a really great scenario here is how do you start to roll out that strategy of getting people on automated payments? Because I think automated payment solves the problem of collections. It solves it. Like, it means if they're automated,
go to 100%.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
100%. We were 96% at the end.
Yeah.
That's a good result. The reality of that is, and what I've seen in a number of cases, is the incentivization of account management to make sure that those customers that are not on automatic payments get on auto pay. So that might be bounties or bonuses. It could be accelerators in commission. Depending on the size of business and who's running the program, you could actually simply use the data and say, here are all the customers that are not on auto pay. Here are their terms. If you get them on auto pay, here are the incentives we'll provide.
Interesting idea. Might write that one down.
Well, it's something that's simple, and the incentive that or the behavior you're looking for is incentivized by the specific data that you're measuring. So you can create very clear outcomes there. And from a simple point of view, once that starts to create that momentum, that's where you start to have those better business conversations. You've got greater, deeper relationships. You don't have delinquent payers. Oh, here's John again calling up. Sorry, John, if you're out there. Here's John again calling up, and he's got a 60-day overdue, but his printer doesn't work. Well, is he going to pay his bill? You start to qualify whether you should be providing service rather than getting rid of John as a client and giving you that space for someone else to fill that.
On that note, a bit of feedback I've had over the years from account managers in being asked by the accounts team, for example, to chase up that debt is that they feel that it damages their reputation, right? But I don't really believe that. I think that that's a symptom of not being able to have the right conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's right. And like you said, the automatic payment solves a whole heap of it. I think that the concept of we're exchanging services for payment. I mean, that's fundamental to the relationship.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
But also, if
there's no other value that you could produce.
Yeah, we've got a contract that says I provide service and you provide payment.
You're not, unless you're a charity. It's like that's the reality of what we do and how we do it.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's interesting for me because direct debit at a high level, which is the only level I'd really thought about it, is seems basic, but in fact, there's any number of ways to kind of get into it a bit at a time, how to communicate it. What's probably like, if there's a business, say, and let's talk mid-market because, that's our target audience is ANZ mid-market businesses. If cash flow at the moment is a problem and their age debtors aren't great, how would they start? Like, what's a couple of key tangible takeaways in terms of starting to communicate with your clients and changing billing processes, educating your team about the why, because they're going to get pushback? What do you start with, and what's the lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah, look, I'd probably start looking at the tools that are available to you. So obviously WisePay is a platform that sits within the MSP marketplace. We do have capability to go into small business as well. So we do have that option for Xero and QuickBooks Online. To be able to utilize payments via our platform for automation too. So there is a good opportunity there for businesses to look at something like our product or other products that are available. There's also just the simple basis of credit cards. Like, credit card is a funding source for a consumer or a business. They come with two options: a point accrual strategy. I want to get as many points for my family holiday. Sorry, ATO, if you're listening. But the reality of it is points do create some preserved value for a business owner. They're like, that's my holiday, or that's my the next Dyson vacuum cleaner, or whatever it is. Like, that's an intrinsic value. The other side of it is, if I'm in cash flow distress, I can use a 55-day no interest credit card to help balance my cash flow without creating ultimately a funding situation in that way. Now, credit cards are never good for long-term funding at 20, 22, 23%, but there's strategies around that too, where people can get like move balance values for 5 and 6% anyway. But the reality of it is, offering credit cards creates a convenience that is far greater than the fee that you pay. Now, I took the approach, you want to use your card, the fee's all yours. Like, I'm not eating that. That's 3% of my revenue is potentially up to 45% of my margin when you're looking at low value products like office licensing and other things. That's a big part of the value that I potentially would create through that sale. So having the ability to at least have convenience creates the opportunity for people to pay quickly. And for me as a consumer, so when I'm looking at businesses or people that I do business with, the ability to pay quickly gets an instant payment. I will click a link, make a payment, punch my credit card, because I just want it done. I don't want to have to think about it, forget about it.
Send me an invoice of them going to go into a portal, do BSB details, where it's just make it easy.
Yeah, it's just, I just want it to be simple. I don't want to have to go somewhere to do something. Just give me the tools to do it quickly and efficiently. And that's one of my visions of success for our product was always all roads lead to Rome. So wherever they are, customers wanting to pay, I've got an option there to allow them to make payment, simply friction-free in a way that gives them convenience for both credit and bank-based debit. Convenient and easy. And if I look at, if I'm thinking business to business versus consumer to business, so let's say I've got an electrician that I use, or a plumber, or someone that's, a really important trade for, what I'm potentially working on, or projects or anything. I pay them immediately, because I find, similar to what you were saying, is that instills a sense, they don't have to think that I'm not going to pay them.
But you want them to care about you as a client. You want them to jump when you need them.
Well,
right?
that's exactly what has happened, because when I've needed them, I've just said, hey, I've got an issue. Like we've got a holiday property, short stay property up in the Sunshine Coast, and we had an issue where the power went out, and the tenants were like, the power's out. I rang the electrician at 11 o'clock at night and said, hey, they've lost power. Can you get around that? Yep, no problems. I'm on my way.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because, we quipped and joked about it. He's like, I've never seen someone pay so fast. He said, I literally send you the invoice and I'll watch and wait for the payment to hit my bank account. And he's like, it's awesome. I love it.
He's like, I get it. You're rich.
But these might be small invoices.
Yeah.
But to him, that's important because that's the work that he's done.
Yeah. I'm not as quick as you, but I'm the same with my pool guy because he's awesome. He's great. So if you're watching, Sean, hi. Anyway.
I get it. You have a pool.
Yeah. This guy.
Got him. Fair play. Touche. Well done. All right, cool. All right. Look, I'm just conscious of the time. So I guess maybe because you are not just working with MSPs, but also mid-market, there's probably a lot of people who should have a chat with you. If they are looking to do that, what's the best way to find you?
Best way to find us is wisepay.com. So it's wise, WISE-PAY.com.
Okay.
You can find us on the website. We integrate to Xero and QuickBooks Online. So there's over 15 million businesses that use those two products alone in the world. So
decent market size.
A decent market size.
Good opportunity.
Great opportunity.
Yeah.
Our core market is managed service providers. So working very closely in Australia and New Zealand, the US and Canada here. And we're also, really excited about just generally being a company that helps businesses to survive. So, if you look at the tools and technologies, the platforms that are available today, all of those things mean nothing if you don't get paid. That's it.
Yeah. I think you're speaking every business owner's language, right? It's just cash flow is king.
Is universal.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cheers, Paul. Really appreciate it, mate. Great insights. I've actually got a couple of things I'm going to hit you up after this from things you've made me think about. So I really appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks for coming on.
Look, so I honestly got so much out of that conversation with Paul at the time. I know Ross and I both did. It can be quite a simple concept when you think about direct debits, but the blockers that you can put up to give reasons why a client wouldn't want to do that, it can be easy to just think, A, either it's too simple, or B, clients won't want to go for it. But I think what Paul did in that conversation is create a pathway to get that in place, one that's win-win and one that certainly solves the problem of cash flow for most businesses. So I really hope you enjoyed it. And again, if you'd like to keep in touch with the content that we create, new episodes of Business Focus come out weekly. Just go to firstfocus.com.au/insights.